In addition, the United States uses submarines to sink ships that transport resources to Japan. In Egypt, British troops win a decisive battle that definitively pushes Italo-German forces out of the country. Fearing the Second Front in Europe, Hitler built the Atlantic Wall, a series of military facilities that protected the shore from invasion. But the Allies first landed in Morocco and Algeria. Italian Libya found itself caught on two fronts. While in the west, an Allied landing allows the rapid capture of French colonies. In retaliation, the Germans and Italians invade Vichy France. In the east, the Axis forces are trying to cut off the Caucasus supply route, but for the first time, the German attack suffers a major military defeat. In the USSR, as the 6th German Army managed to seize with great difficulty 90% of Stalingrad, a Soviet counterattack takes place outside the city. They drive out Romanian troops, who form the rear flanks, and surround the 300,000 German soldiers in the city. After 2 months of resistance, they are forced to surrender. In Africa, the last Axis troops are defeated. Africa was now completely controlled by the Allies, who organized the entry into Sicily. On the Eastern Front, Hitler tries to maintain the upper hand by launching a new offensive on Kursk, which leads to the biggest tank battle in history. Under pressure, Stalin urges his allies to open a new front in the West. The United Kingdom and the United States first want to weaken and demoralize Germany by intensifying bombing of industrial centers and cities. Hamburg, the country's second city, is largely razed to the ground. In Kursk, despite heavy losses, the Soviets prevail and gain the upper hand over the Germans. In Italy, after the fall of Mussolini, a British landing threatens the country. The new government signs an armistice with the Allies. But the Germans anticipate this scenario and quickly take control of Italian territories. On September 12, 1943, Mussolini escaped from captivity during an operation by German paratroopers and Waffen-SS commandos. After a joint meeting, Adolf Hitler appointed him the head of a puppet regime in northern Italy called the Italian Social Republic, also informally called the Republic of Salo. With an Allied victory now seeming possible, Stalin for the USSR, Churchill for the United Kingdom and Roosevelt for the United States meet in Tehran to prepare for the end of the war. The Tehran Conference was held secretly at the Soviet Embassy in Tehran, the capital of Iran, from November 28 to December 1, 1943. This meeting had a significant impact on World War II. For this reason, Iran was dubbed the Allied Victory Bridge. Holding a meeting of Allied leaders in Tehran also played an important role in determining the fate of the war. The invasion of the Normandy coast of France and the offensive of Russian forces from the east were planned in Tehran. The three leaders agreed to coordinate better, to soon open a second front in Europe via 2 landings in France, and to provide military support to the communist resistance led by Josip Broz Tito in Yugoslavia. In the east, the siege of Leningrad ends. In the west, after the bombing of German factories which produce coal-based synthetic fuel, Allies are ready to open a new front. On July 20, 1944, a number of German army officers carried out a bombing operation to eliminate Adolf Hitler and prevent Germany from defeating the war, which failed and Hitler survived. The biggest military landing in history allows troops largely from the United States, the United Kingdom and Canada to gain a foothold in Normandy, while the USSR for its part launches a huge offensive which in 2 months pushes the Germans back by 600 kilometers. In France, while a second landing takes place in the south, General de Gaulle enters a liberated Paris. On multiple fronts, Allied advances liberate countries one by one. With the victory, the Allied powers announced the creation of the United Nations. Countries that declare war on Germany and Japan will be admitted to its founding conference. This triggers a wave of war declarations. The USSR swears to also declare war on Japan after Germany surrenders. The last 4 months of the Reich prove to be the deadliest. Berlin is finally surrounded by the Soviets. On April 12, 1945, US President Franklin Roosevelt died of illness and was replaced by Harry Truman. On April 25, 1945, Allied forces were advancing to northern Italy, and the fall of the Salo Republic was about to happen. Mussolini and his mistress tried to flee to Switzerland, but were both arrested by Italian partisans on April 28 and shot near Lake Como. On April 30, 1945, just before the arrival of Soviet troops, Hitler committed suicide in his shelter in Berlin. 8 days later, Germany surrendered. In the east, US and Soviet forces joined together to conquer the Japanese Empire. The Soviet Union launched a military offensive through Manchuria and advanced in the southern Sakhalin and Kuril Islands, while the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 15, 1945, Japan's surrender was announced and signed on September 2. This marks the end of World War II. The country will be occupied by the United States until 1952. In the West, the USSR and the United States agree on a provisional division of Korea. Finally, in Indochina, the French regain control of their former colony but face opposition by some Vietnamese groups claiming independence. Colonial empires worldwide are weakened as independence movements gain momentum, provoked by heavy involvement in war and high death tolls. After 6 years of war, the casualties are heavy with more than 80 million dead, most of whom are civilians. Many cities were completely destroyed. The Soviet Union is forcing millions of German prisoners of war to work, many of whom will die. Germany and Austria were divided among the victorious countries. In 1943, the Allies pledged to leave Iran after the war and recognize the country's independence. But with the end of the war, the Soviet Union avoided this and supported and established separatist governments in Azerbaijan and Kurdistan provinces, which with the ingenuity of the Prime Minister of Iran and the support of the United States, forced to retreat and leave Iran. The United States and the Soviet Union appeared as the remaining global superpowers. Both sides will eventually engage in an indirect confrontation called the Cold War around the world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe my channel. May ALD.